Hi, this is Irving Steele. We are here on Local Issues, and today we're so lucky to have a special guest. Her name is Julia McGrath. She is the Grants Coordinator and Special Projects Coordinator for Congressman Joe Courtney's office for the 2nd Congressional District here in Connecticut. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And it's just so fascinating that there's a whole side of politics that I think the majority of our country doesn't know about. And you're kind of on the insides of all that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I work for the district office. I work here in Norwich. And so we are most of what our office does is constituent services. A lot of casework, working with different federal agencies to resolve constituent issues like student loan issues, Social Security, immigration casework. Our district director spearheads that. On my end, as the Grants and Special Projects Coordinator, I work with different entities like municipalities or nonprofits to locate different federal funding sources and to apply and hopefully then be able to implement them in. So we get to really invest ourselves in the community. It's great.
That's awesome. And I'm a little curious too, maybe we can take one step back to learn more about your story. How did you kind of get involved in this office? If you don't mind sharing a little bit about your passion for policy.
Yeah, so I didn't really plan to do this. I went to school, I went to Loyola University in Baltimore, and I started as an elementary education major. I did about a semester or so of that and realized it was not the right fit for me. And kind of went to my core advisor in a panic, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, because that's what my whole plan was up until then. I had interned with our literacy specialist all throughout high school in my school district, and I really kind of staked my life on that. And she happened to be the chair of the English department, and I think was like, let me see if I can get another student in there. So I took some English classes on her suggestion and ended up really loving it. And so I became an English major and then got 2 minors in writing and film studies, and thought I was going to go into journalism. I interned with Voice of America in DC my senior year of college and worked mostly on the documentary unit on namely 2 docuseries, one kind of following the survivors of the Parkland shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, which was where I spent most of my time, but then also in kind of the pre-production of a series on press freedom issues in Turkey, which was interesting to kind of see both ends of production. And then I graduated, and right before I graduated, I was applying for like every job under the sun, as you do when you have no experience anywhere. And I decided to apply for a congressional internship because it had always been something in the back of my mind that I wanted to try. And I ended up, the summer I graduated, summer of 2019, interning with the Congressman's office. And I really, really loved it more than I thought I would. I loved the environment of the district office. I loved the staff and also the work. It was really interesting and varied, and just something that you never knew what was coming.
What was the internship like? It was a short-term internship?
It was about 3 days a week, 2-3 days a week, unpaid at the time. Now our interns are paid. But that's okay. I balanced it out with, summer work and whatever. And it was about, a full work day. I would go in, there would be one other intern at the time, and we would answer phones, and we would help with, writing letters and doing floor statements and certificates and, all the things that a congressional office does that keep it going.
It must have been so interesting just to get on the inside right out of college and see what an office is like.
It was, especially I'd spent time in DC, but not on the Hill. I was like Hill adjacent. And so
you could see the Hill.
I could see the Hill. I walked past the Hill every day, but I was out in the agency buildings, which was also an amazing internship, and I loved that experience as well. and also got in the field in a lot of different ways. But this was really fun because, there was just a ton of opportunities to try different things and go out on different meetings, and it was great. And so I ended that internship in August of 2019, and then by December 16th of 2019, I came on as a full-time staff member. I started off as kind of grants coordinator / higher ed caseworker. And that was great. It was a great experience. I worked a lot on student loan casework, which is immense. A lot of the time, there's a lot of need in that area, and so I was grateful for that experience as a student loan, holder myself.
And it's something I hear about. I teach at a local college here, and almost every single one is telling me about the pains and struggles with those loans.
Yeah, and there are many programs that have been set up to try to help students that don't always work perfectly, and so we try to be like the grease in the gears to get things moving, and that was great. But as I got further into my tenure with the office, I started to focus much more on grants and funding projects to eventually get where I am now, where I solely focus on grants and funding. And that really came to be over the implementation of the American Rescue Plan, which is a whole lot of grant money. And it's a great job. I love it.
That's cool. And I think you really highlight the courage that you have, that you are going down this path, you want to be a teacher, and it's so hard to realize, hey, this isn't meant for me, and go down another path. So I think that's a lot of courage just in that. Yeah,
it was, thank you. It was a little jarring at first because I was really sure that that's what that was going to be. And a lot of people were like, I don't know if that's quite what you're meant for. And I would fight them on it. I was like, no, this is what I'm doing. And then I got, I had the opportunity to volunteer in classrooms while I was in Baltimore, and it was great, but it just wasn't quite right for me. And I'm very happy with the decision I made. Yeah, it was great.
I mean, especially coming up in a few days, it's your, second year anniversary at the office?
It is.
So that's really exciting.
I got it marked on the calendar. It's a little weird because, a couple months after I started, the pandemic started, and so I feel like I'm still meeting people face to face. We had a very brief 15-month tenure when we were working from home, but we're fully back in the office now, back in the community. In safe and healthy ways, and it's good to be back. It's good to be getting back to normal.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, we're very social creatures. It's good to be face to face. And I thought it was really interesting too that you said you did some docuseries, some work in regards to the Parkland shooting, and just last week we had the terrible act in Michigan. So do you kind of see some of the same things happening? Do you see any progress in terms of policy towards that?
I see a lot of effort to do so, that require, for some reason that I've never been able to wrap my head around, and I'm not a particularly political person, but this has been an issue that's been made very political, and so at this point in time, legislation has not been passed that would address things like this. I was 15 when Sandy Hook shooting happened, and I remember where I was in my high school in the gym, and
that took place here in Connecticut.
Right. And I mean, I have family in Newtown, and, and it was, I don't know, it felt like the world stopped for weeks after, and it's very jarring every time it happens again.
So jarring, again and again.
And before Sandy Hook. And so, the news last week, and that being one of hundreds of incidents in this year and last year alone, was, again, really disheartening. I do think that the Parkland students and survivors and their parents have really, really made a huge impact when, they're on the Hill advocating, they're in hearings, they're testifying before Congress. So, and out in the streets protesting and meeting with members of Congress and heads of state, and getting international peace awards. And so there is always progress being made, but I think there's still quite some time to go as we see in what's happening right now.
Yeah, and I think that's true almost in every aspect of life. There's always further that we can do, always improvement there. And last week I had an op-ed published in a local journalism outlet, and I said guns versus no guns. And we don't need to get into all the policy issues of that, but I just looked at the economic impact. And on average, America has about $288 billion that goes towards gun violence in America every single year. So, I mean, just the economic implications are huge. But then the other side was you're looking at press freedom as well, which I think is extremely relevant in today's world, too. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that project?
Sure. I mean, so I worked really on the pre-production angle of that series. So I was doing mostly research and setting up sources and filming locations and things like that, and making sure that my producers could get from A to B and that they would have someone to meet. And so but I learned a lot about press freedom. As much as I think we have our own media issues here, it's a whole different world in many other places, including Turkey. The concept of state outlets versus private outlets, which all of our outlets are what they would consider private, was really foreign to me. The idea that there's a government-fed entity, although Voice of America actually is a state agency, or a federal agency, but by their terms, a state agency that was created in World War II, I believe, to broadcast free press to countries that didn't have it, mostly via radio. So, but they have their own mission. But the idea that most of your media is run by the government is much more common in other places, especially in the research that I did in Turkey. I worked with a lot of people from Turkey who are now here in the U.S. working with Voice of America, and they were awesome. And I learned a lot from them, and even just logistical things of how to get around. And we were making sure that everybody had places to stay while they were there. And
so you were actually in Turkey for this?
No, I was in D.C.
Okay.
And then we were sending my lead producer, Beth Mendelsohn, who is supremely talented, and I was very lucky to work under her. She's she's an Emmy-winning producer of like all sorts of like PBS documentaries, and this is her bread and butter. And so she went over, did her magic, and we stayed and made sure one, that I could finish my senior year of college so that I could graduate, and also so that she could do her job over there. You want in situations like that to be as low-key as possible. You want people to be able to trust you as a journalist. Your sources, don't want to stand out too much, and so sending one or two people over was really the best option.
It's a very sensitive issue.
Yeah, well, yeah, and especially when you have outside media sources that aren't Turkish, they're from other countries, that might raise some eyebrows, and so you want to be sensitive that you're not creating too many waves. So but I'd love to go someday. It'd be cool. I love to go anywhere.
Yeah, I heard it's a beautiful country too, and you realize how lucky we are with the press freedoms when you are in another country. I've had this experience where maybe you have something online or you have something published, and then you see it instantly taken away, and you never realize how lucky we are here in America until something like that happens.
Yeah, it's true. No, it's really, it is true, and I remember speaking to one of my supervisor's colleagues who was Turkish, and was talking about, how few outlets were left that were not state-run, and how, she had a friend who was working at a newspaper that they were basically changing locations like every 2 weeks or so on average, just to kind of stay under the radar, because they were trying to publish information about, whatever it was of a current event at the time, that just they wanted to present it in an angle that maybe wasn't kosher with the state.
And that's what we're seeing too right now in places in Asia, that a lot of the Wall Street Journal, New York Times reporters, they're just all kicked out of these countries. So what's actually going on in the streets, it's hard to know.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And so that was a really rewarding project to work on also. I didn't get to spend, I really dug in with the Parkland project. I got to produce my own episode and all sorts of stuff, but it was great to kind of pivot at the end of the internship and try something completely new.
That's cool. I'd love to check those out. And I'm really curious too, for most of the people I think in our country, we see the politicians on TV, we read about them in the newspapers, and then what's actually going on in the district office? Can you provide some details? How many people? What is it like? What's a typical day for you?
There's a lot going on in the district office. A lot of phones ringing all the time, and you know, lots of trying to pick multiple phones up at the same time and make sure everybody gets an answer. We're a really small office on the district side. We are on the ledge side too, but on our district side, we have 7 people, I think, overall.
In the Norwich office?
We have a Norwich office, but then we also have an office up in Enfield. That just because we have most, if not all of Connecticut on the eastern side of the river.
It's a huge
plus
district.
a couple towns on the western side. Including I'm from Old Saybrook, so we're over there, and we go all the way to Madison on the shoreline. And so, yeah, we have a very large district, so we try to have a couple access points, but there aren't that many of us, so 2 is going to be it. There's some days where there's only 1 person in Enfield. But there could be a lot of things going on an average day. We have caseworkers processing immigration casework. We have Social Security issues trying to be resolved. We have an IRS caseworker who has been absolutely running in circles over the past year and a half, almost 2 years, just trying to, get taxes sorted in an agency that's really struggling with their workload. Mm-hmm. We have small business relief being worked on. I'm working with entities on finding funding and having meetings about future economic development issues. We have, who you spoke to, a wonderful veterans representative, Manny Meneses, who has, basically spends his whole day talking to veterans and saying, okay, what do you need? How am I going to get it? And so, yeah, we basically spend our whole day interacting with the constituency and trying to just do the best we can to help people. I like to kind of say, the legislative team looks at all the ways that we can change the world for our constituents, and we look for all the ways that we can help them best navigate it as it is at that time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like almost an A to Z shop of helping anything to do with life, basically, that they need help with.
Yeah. And if there's something that, people call us with state issues all the time, and so we'll help connect them to state representatives or senators. People call sometimes with issues that government it does not have jurisdiction over, and so we try to always refer them out to the best possible contact and just make sure that nobody kind of gets left mm-hmm. without any help. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Giving these people a voice and an ear for them to talk to. And
yeah.
I think it's cool that you're doing a bunch of stuff with art. It seems like grants with the humanities, things like that. Do you have any cool, new, interesting projects or things that you're hearing about throughout the region that you could possibly share?
Oh, yeah. All the time. I am like an arts and culture girl. That's my bread and butter. I did musical theater for 10 plus years before I went to college, and I'm always trying to find ways to pull arts money into this part of the state. We're really lucky to have the Southeastern Connecticut Cultural Coalition, which is a little bit of a misleading name because now they also represent a bunch of towns up in the northeast corner as well. But they are basically advocates for the arts and culture sector in Eastern Connecticut. And recently they were able to put on a campaign to municipalities to ask them to provide 1% of their American Rescue Plan funds to the arts and culture sector in their town.
Wow.
Which is, it's been really beneficial to a group of people who don't always get a lot of relief. In our office, relief to arts and culture throughout this is economic resiliency and development.
And did a lot of municipalities sign up and they gave 1%?
They did. Norwich pledged I think it was Norwich pledged $500,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
Alone. So, and many towns did it. And so they, we're lucky that our towns do really believe in the arts and culture sector. I was just speaking with the executive director of the Cultural Coalition this morning. And we're talking about some future moves that they are making to continue to find new ways to just really bolster the creative economy in this part of the state. What is it worth to have jobs that you can go to if we're creating a workforce development if they don't have something to do when they get out of work? Mm-hmm. So it all goes together. It's all one cohesive plan. So we're very big on arts and culture.
That's awesome. I mean, I think it's sort of the American ingenuity that allows us to succeed and progress, and a lot of that comes back to arts and creativity, I feel.
Absolutely.
And especially in this region too, we have the Eugene O'Neill, we have the Gard Arts Theater. I mean, this is just southeastern Connecticut. We have so many jewels and gems. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, if we support that, it could potentially create economic development that might even be more sustainable.
Yeah. Well, and so for both the Gard Arts Center and Eugene O'Neill, they both received a Shuttered Venues Operating Grant, which is basically it's a small business administration grant from the Consolidated Appropriations Act. There's an acronym for the coronavirus specific section that I have never got down. It's like CURSA or something. I always end up falling back on Consolidated Appropriations. But that's been really helpful with venues that have not been able to host anyone in over a year. And Waterford, where we are sitting right now, actually was very generous to also give some of their American Rescue Plan funding to the Eugene O'Neill Center to do some rehabilitation of, I believe, their roof or some other structures. And so they have been, the communities have been banding together, and there has been support coming in, but they're still, we need to continue to bolster that community.
Yeah.
That gives us so much.
It gives us so much, and you think maybe 18 months or however long they were pretty much shuttered. It's really difficult. And
in a lot of cases, they're still having to, implement mitigating factors just to try to keep people safe, spacing people out, staggered timing for entrance, and masking, which not everyone wants to go to a show with that. And so you get less people coming in. And so it's an ongoing thing that we're talking about all the time.
Yeah. My job last night, I was volunteering at the Gard Arts Theater, and my job was to hold up a sign that says, "Mask up."
Oh, Lord.
I wasn't the most popular
I was going to say that you probably were not the favorite in the room.
Yeah.
It's important, though. You're doing a good job.
I'm trying to, at least. And one thing I get excited about, too, with the arts and some of these places that you mentioned, even the Kate and Old Saybrook, is that if we support this kind of economic development and have tourism coming to the region, it's not something that taxes our schools so much. It doesn't tax our municipality so much, but it does provide that extra source of revenue and attention to the district.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, we choose to look at it as a cohesive part of the plan, is that people live full lives where they do go to work and they do need to go grocery shopping, and they need to have options for that. But they also want to have fun, and they want to have enriched lives where they do new and interesting things, and they're exposed to things that they don't get to do when they're just doing their 9 to 5 or their third shift or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so it's all part of a larger picture of a good life.
Definitely. And I think especially more so now, people are viewing life maybe in a different light during and now after the pandemic, hopefully, that art and these things of enjoying life, if possible, are becoming even more important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so I'm curious if someone in the community, they have some art project or creative project or something going on, what would you potentially advise them, or what is a potential process to connect with you in regards to that?
Sure. Well, you can always start by calling the Norwich office, and we can talk about your project, through the details itself, because that's always the first thing I want to do, to give you the best advice. And then great partners in looking for support and avenues forward. Our Connecticut's Office for the Arts are the Southeastern Connecticut Cultural Coalition. Our office is also always willing to support. We write letters of support for grant applications that go in, which really do hold a lot of weight with agencies when they, because we can speak to the impact on our region.
And those letters would go then to DC.
Yeah, so whatever grant program that you're applying for, they would go to the administrator of that program to be considered with the application. And that's something that we're always happy to do. And yeah, I would say just give us a call and we'll talk about it and talk through the specifics. I never want to give a blanket statement because every project is different, and every project is a bit of a different fit. Some fall more under humanities, and then we go to like NEH, National Endowment of Humanities money, and then you have arts projects. But we've seen a lot of really cool art projects come into the district. Up in Enfield, the Opera House Players recently got an NEA grant to put on a production of Next to Normal in collaboration with the American School for the Deaf. So there's going to be sign language, American Sign Language, incorporated throughout the performance. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity. I'm excited for that one.
That's awesome. And I guess the premise for a lot of these is the organization needs to be established, hopefully, probably be a 501c3 before they start working down that process.
Definitely have a tax status. You don't necessarily need to be a 501c3, but a lot of times arts projects usually end up coming from a 501c3. But you definitely want to have a tax status because you're going to need your IRS paperwork to apply and do that whole process. And also know that you do, when it comes to federal grant funding, you're going to need to know that you can handle the responsibility of it. It is a heavy reporting requirement for most programs, and it is a little bit more labor intensive than nonprofit grant funding or other sources. But we're happy always to connect entities to different support services that can help guide you through that process and get you prepared for that. But it's definitely something to keep in mind. It's a responsibility to take on.
Okay, so we can just look up the number on the webpage and call or email and get connected.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I'm there all the time.
Awesome. And I'm curious too if you have any advice to the community if people want to become more involved, whether it's politically or with the arts or grants, just any kind of high-level advice of how people could become more involved?
Sure. I mean, I think just in terms of getting involved, you should really start at your local municipal level. It all trickles up, if that makes sense, from there.
Not trickle down, trickle up.
It doesn't trickle down, it trickles up. And yeah, exactly. In terms of, at least the way we do this in Eastern Connecticut, I've been very impressed with. I can't speak for other regions, but our municipalities and our local stakeholders are amazing advocates for themselves. So maybe volunteer for your town council, go to your town council meetings, or volunteer for a local candidate that you really like, or go, see what's going on with your local arts group that maybe you want to advocate for, and see how you can help them. Like, what do they need? State reps and state senators are always welcome people to talk to them. Welcoming, there we go, people to talk to them. And our office loves people's input. And yeah, I think you just need to start communicating and seeing what's happening on the local level, because it all starts there. That's where your life is.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we just have a tiny bit of time left, and really wanted to thank you for being on the show today, Julia.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.